Hi guys, welcome back to the Geek and Hermit. I'm Alfari, and we're going to be doing a review of Dark Souls. Well, this is actually Dark Souls Remaster. This is the Steam version I'm doing it on now. I did play the original way back when on PlayStation 3, but the remaster just clears it up pretty well. To be honest, it makes it look a little bit prettier, but largely it's just optimization more than anything. Especially in Blighttown, because if anyone's ever played the PlayStation 3 version, you'll know how much it lags and just didn't work with it back then, and now it runs fine. Blighttown still sucks balls, but you know, it runs fine at least. Now, Dark Souls wasn't the first one in the series, that was actually Demon Souls, but I don't think anyone could disagree with me at this point that it was Dark Souls that kind of really pushed it into the stratosphere of popularity. Because honestly, I played this one first and then went back and dug out Demon Souls, which is still alright, but it was very rough around the edges. The remaster has actually sorted out a lot of the rough edges, but now, of course, if you've played the series or known about the series, you probably should do really, it's known for being ball-crushingly hard in certain parts. Now, while when you first start playing it, I kind of do agree with that, because at first it's just like a proper old-school sort of RPG, action RPG, where you've just got to learn through repetition. Okay, is it repetition? You just got to learn through repetition, really. Try it, balls up, get murdered, come back, try a different way, get murdered, come back, try again. Oh right, you've done it this time. And it's just really one of those games. Is it really as hard as people make out? In some cases, I think it really depends on patience more than anything. Because you will come across some battles where you just think, I can't do this and it's bullshit. But if you just try and change up your tactics a little bit, or to be honest, 9 times out of 10 it's just learning the enemy's patterns. Because if you'll find that when a giant 20-foot bleeding monster's coming at you, you don't know what to do and you panic sometimes. But when you calm down a little bit and just take your time, if you sometimes just run directly at the legs or run behind them, they can't hit you, and then it just makes the fight a giant piss take. I did have some fights in this game that are complete and utter bullshit though. My worst one, I think, I'm trying to think what the worst one was. With it, Bed of Chaos, it comes up a bit later on in the video. That one I just thought was absolute crap. But honestly, if you've never played this game before, give it a shot, because it's fairly cheap now. But it's one of my favourite games of all time. I've finished it on PlayStation 3 years ago, and I've only just finished a remaster recently. Now, while it still took me a good few weeks to actually get through it, that's with having breaks in between because certain points I wanted to pull my eyes out, it's definitely doable. And honestly, I know people want to go in blind sometimes, but it does help if you're having a hard time. Read the messages on the floor and actually pay attention to them. Not in all cases, because sometimes people will say, oh, try jumping off here, so you'll then do it and then you die. You'll see them as like little orange messages. If you ever see them knocking about outside of the tutorial, it means the player's put that there. You have to kind of take them with a grain of salt, but if it says up and left or something, or danger left, usually means there's something behind the door on the left that's going to kick your ass. So I love that kind of interconnectivity part of the game, where you can kind of communicate with players going through the same slog of shit that you're going through. And you can't, it's weird, you kind of build up like a kind of rapport. You never actually see anyone really, unless you summon them in, but it kind of feels like there's someone there struggling through the shit with you, and the online connectivity to this game makes it so much better. It's only a small bit really, like you'll see them dotted about now and again, and obviously you'll see the blood patterns where if anyone's recently died where you are, you see a little blood splatter, you can click on it and then see how they died. It doesn't show you what killed them, but it's usually a good tip if you're going down a new corridor, you press it and you see someone go in and then suddenly get flattened, you know the trap or the giant is going to hit them or something, so you can kind of get a bit of a tip just from someone else's pain, which is kind of sick but also kind of funny. I'm trying to think what else I need to say about this game. It does make, like I was saying about the edges before with Demon Souls, if you've ever played the original one, you need to collect these grasses and things to heal, and you do have to farm them, and they do run out, and it's a bit of a nuisance really unless you use miracles, where Dark Souls kind of made it a little bit easier by using the Estus flasks, which they basically reset every time you die. You get 5 basically. It's just 5 heal potions, that as soon as you go back to a bonfire, even though it resets everything, every enemy you've killed in the area, it resets it, but it also gives you your potions back and heals you. So at least it's a bit easier to try and practice new areas. Where I found in Demon Souls, when I was trying to do areas, I didn't want to heal because I wanted to save my actual heals for a decent run rather than just a random practice run through an area. So that kind of makes it a bit easier in Dark Souls. I wouldn't get too put off by the difficulty though, because honestly it's harder early on. I'm assuming a lot of vets will probably agree with me with this. When you're first starting out, and even when you know what you're doing a bit, the beginning of the game is a lot harder than later on in the game. Like the first few bosses I struggled with more than later on. I think it's largely due to lack of practice, and also at that point you don't really have any gear, decent weapons, and you've got no alternatives. Like if one tactic doesn't work, you're stuffed because, okay, you've only got the one shitty sword. Where later on you can kind of get... To be honest, I breezed through a lot of the harder fights later on because I had like a lightning infused weapon and a fire infused weapon. So if I got my ass kicked the first time around, I've tried a different weapon and bang, look, oh, there's a weakness to it, and then you take it down pretty quick. Early on in the game though, you look like you shat your pants when you're running. It takes that long, and you have one crappy sword, and you struggle, and everyone goes through that, but it does get a bit easier. And honestly, don't be afraid to just grind out souls. If you find a good area that you can do over and over again, just grind out some levels. For me, definitely in Dark Souls especially, the magic system is broken beyond belief. So if you want an easy run of it to experience the game, not totally on easy mode, but a lot easier than most people would, just go for a magic build. Look online how to do magic and what specs and what not to do. And honestly, it trivialises a lot of the bosses because they don't even get near you. You just blast them, 3 or 4 hits and bang they go. Where the more melee approach, which typically I think a lot of people will just go straight away to, thinking it's easier, actually makes the game a lot harder. And strangely, I went a full strength build this time around, which ended up me using 2-handers, which is a very risk-reward approach really, because although it hits like a truck, if you miss with your hit or you're fighting something fast, you've got no way to kind of get out there and you get your ass kicked. Especially on some of the harder battles like Artorias of the Abyss. He was a pain in the ass. You'll see that later on in the video. But yeah, it's definitely one of the best games I've probably ever played. It does look rough around the edges, it doesn't look fantastic, and the plot is there. It's just trying to understand it. You probably need to read a university bleeding lecture about it. Not a lecture, what are they called? A dissertation about it. Because it's so breadcrumbed around the game. You can find it, and there's a lot of depressing stories in there, but trying to piece them together. There's YouTube videos on it and everything, but just try and play it yourself, try and make sense of it. Just don't be going in and expecting Final Fantasy kind of plot, because that's not really what it's about. It's just about struggling and surviving and improving and overcoming ridiculous odds. Because I know it sounds ridiculous, but when people say the whole point is just coming up against something you don't think you can do, it seems impossible. When you actually do beat a boss that's been battering you for days, it is absolutely amazing. The only thing I can really give tips for really is, honestly, whatever build you're going for, stack vitality as much as possible. I think up to 40, I think. No, I mean, not straight away, but just cap it around 40 and move on. Because more than anything, the more bleeding health you've got, the better, because you can at least soak up some hits. But yeah, if you want to leave any comments below, I'll try and answer anything I can. Honestly, I'm not very good at this game. I died hundreds of times. But honestly, on each boss I probably died about maybe 2 or 3 times to each one, and then mastered them each time. So you kind of... On this, I find in these games, the actual areas environments harder than the actual bosses. Because a boss is just, right, okay, you've got to deal with this one thing. Where environments, you've got to deal with trying to find out where the hell you're going, not get killed by a million enemies, and oh shit, look, you didn't see this trap, right, you're dead. But honestly, it's one of those series that just keep getting praise and praise heaped upon it, but I actually agree with it in this case. I don't think it's overhyped. And they do, especially if you start with Dark Souls first, I think it's got a good mix of environments, and there's a lot of different builds you can do, and especially when you get a bit more leveled up later on, it makes it a lot easier where you can try different things and different specs and different armor sets. And like I was saying, if you try magic, it just makes the game a lot easier. Pyromancer I found was a bit easier because I could use swords and throw fireballs, and it made some battles a lot easier. Also, one thing I didn't cover yet is the fact you can summon in enemies. Well, enemies can be summoned in to kick your ass, but you can summon in friends to help you do certain bosses, or even random people. You just need to be in human form for it, and they can literally help you do bosses. And when you've got, you can also summon in NPCs as well, as long as you're in human form. Again, near certain boss doors, you can see a summon sign. You can then summon them in, and they can help you. And even if you don't do much damage, if they just distract the boss and get killed instead of you, it makes the boss a lot easier. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed watching the video. I'll end it with Artorias and then the final battle. Artorias, I think, was one of my favourite fights just because it feels like a straight up sword fight. It felt like a PvP battle more than an actual boss fight. Yeah, it was fast, and it's not the fight to do with a two-handed weapon, but I enjoyed it. And yeah, the final battle is fairly easy, but I struggled with it. Because it's like one of the last things I did. You're supposed to learn how to parry, which makes it a cakewalk, but I can't parry for shit, so I just did a straight up sword fight with him, and you'll see at the end, I wasn't sure who actually died in the last few seconds. So yeah, thank you for watching, guys, and I shall see you next time. Yeah, bye.